Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Our guest today is Ruth Maille. She returns to the show to celebrate the power of empathy. Be the friend you always wanted. Before we invite Ruth into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Adventures of Harry and Friends, the wonderful picture book character education series written by our friend Sarah Belisa Tucker. Is your child shy? Do they have difficulty making friends? Do they worry that no one will like them? Teach your child to have confidence in themselves and to embrace who they are by grabbing a copy of The Day I Made My Best Friend. It's book number 1 in the Adventures of Harry and Friends series. This really is a wonderful series. There's 7 books altogether. The Day I Met My Best Friend, Harry's first martial arts lesson, Harry gets into the swing of things, Harry and the Broken Toy, I'm Not Afraid, I Quit, and What Should I Do? Great titles that will teach your kids important lessons and help them become better people. The Adventures of Harry and Friends by Sarah Belisa Tucker. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by thebiggodbooks.com. Our friends Andrea and Gabe Olson, they've put together some amazing books that are all about helping your little ones learn about our big God. Their brand new title is A Little Love. In this book, we meet G. G's feeling sad. His best friend moved away, and now G is so lonely. He asks God for a new friend. Will God answer his prayers? Join G as he learns that God hears every single one of our prayers. God answers those prayers, and sometimes he answers those prayers in ways we do not expect. What a comforting and inspiring series this is. Go to thebiggodbooks.com to get your copy of A Little Love. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Rhode Island. Our guest is returning to the Reading with Your Kids podcast to celebrate the latest in her Power of series. It's called The Power of Empathy. Be the friend you've always wanted. Please welcome back to the show, Ruth Maille. Hey, Ruth, how are you?
Hey, Jen, I am great.
I'm so delighted that you're back on the show. Not too long ago, Ruth and I had the opportunity to meet in the real world after knowing each other for a couple of years. She was part of our amazing celebration, celebrating our episode 1500 of the Reading with Your Kids podcast at the Buttonwood Park Zoo. It was a beautiful day. And Mirabella Q, our amazing intern, interviewed Ruth that day. Ruth read her books to the families that were in attendance. She brought along these big gift baskets for the families featuring her lovable character Orbit and her books and all sorts of other goodies. So I'm delighted that you're back, and I'm so psyched that you have a brand new book.
I do. I'm very excited about this book. I mean, I love all my books, but this one really took shape, and I think it's something that all children really need to learn about, not just empathy, but about their own feelings, and that no matter whether they're good or bad or feelings, whether they're sad, happy, excited, anxious, they're all important feelings in order for them to acknowledge them and then be able to handle what can I do with these feelings. So I think that's the first step. And I tried this out with my preschoolers all summer. And it was really exciting to see them actually understand what some of these feelings were and how they could express them.
Yeah. This idea of teaching our kids to deal with their feelings, I'm really happy that it's gaining steam, and we're being more mindful, being more purposeful when we're talking to kids to help them understand their feelings and to deal with their feelings. Because, I'm a lot older than you. When I was growing up, there was, no feel. Shut up, wipe your tears, pick yourself up, stop crying, don't be a baby, and just get on with it.
Right.
And that's not a healthy way to deal with it.
No, because you bottle it all up, and then eventually you just pop. And that's where, if you can help children to understand. And again, part of it is because it's instinctual, right? We're not going to show our feelings. We're not going to acknowledge our feelings. But the bottom line is the best way to live our best life is to acknowledge our feelings, whether they are sad or happy, or any of the other feelings like, ashamed or excited. They're all important. And, one of the things that I did with the kids this summer was we would go swimming in the pool. And while we were in the pool, we would always sing songs. And so I took that, If You're Happy and You Know It, and changed the verses to it. And the kids eventually, by the end of the summer, they were making funny faces, like silly, or anxious. And they'd be like, really anxious. Or they would use words that were like, if you're anxious and you know it, take deep breaths. So it was a learning experience for them. And when you do it with them, they pick it up. And I think this is an important character trait, which is empathy, is so important for children, for themselves, to show empathy for themselves, but also everyone around them. And in my book, we even show empathy to Bandit, who's a dog that actually stole one of the books from Noah. And he dug it, put it into the ground, and he dug it up, and there it was. But you have to show empathy towards animals as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a very well-rounded book. A lot of the examples are real-life examples that the children helped me to come up with. And the other children can actually see themselves in these examples.
Now, when you're talking about helping kids understand their feelings, you're not talking about bubble wrapping our kids so that they don't feel disappointment, they don't fall down and scrape their knees. I mean, we don't want our kids to be disappointed or to experience a loss or to, break a bone or a pinky or a fingernail, but it happens, and it's
exactly.
And so, talk a little bit about that, because I think we're kind of waking up to the fact that there's been a lot of helicopter parenting going on, and a lot of kids were raised in bubble wrap, and we're seeing the result of that with a lot of kids who, boy, if they hear something that disagrees with the way they feel, their heads explode. And
yeah, it's exactly like, everybody gets a trophy, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't want your child to be disappointed, but on the other hand, they have to experience life. And if they can experience life younger and have the ability, the tools to be able to explain or be able to talk about it, or to be able to understand why they're feeling the way they're feeling, that can help them to actually accept whatever it is that they are dealing with. So if it is a loss, and it could be a loss of a goldfish, it doesn't have to be something grand. But the children, what I find, especially in my preschool, is that if you're honest with children and you don't make believe that it's something else, they're going to understand it better. You don't have to baby talk them. You don't have to, give them a special treat because they did such and such. No, sometimes they have to do that because it's part of their life. It's part of them living in a family. It's part of them going to school. And so, yes, there's baby steps to it, but I think that the important message is, let's get a hold of our feelings. Let's talk about our feelings and notice, because when you talk about your own feelings, you can notice that in someone else. So if you have, I'll give you an example. One of my children, who's 2.5, in the middle of the summer, we were in the pool, and she noticed that one of my friends, who was another provider, was sitting on the deck, and she was kind of overseeing everything. And then I had the rest of the adults in the pool. And she turned around and she said, I'm going to go and go sit on the deck. And I said, why? And she said, because I think Paul is lonely. Now, lonely is one of those words where you're like, really, do you know that? Mm-hmm. But she did, because all summer we kept touching on all these different emotions, all these different feelings. And so she could recognize that Paula looked a little lonely. She was by herself. She didn't really have a smile on her face. She was just kind of overseeing things. So Rosie took it to herself and went over and showed her empathy for her. Yeah. In a very authentic way, mm-hmm. very her way. Yeah. So I think that we need to educate our children, to have them understand that, you know what, good and bad is going to happen. Mm-hmm. It is going to happen. It's how you handle it, how you approach it can be the difference between a good outcome and a bad outcome. Yeah. And I think that's our first step. And then once they can understand their emotions and they can talk about their emotions and recognize them, then they can be more empathetic to themselves, which is a huge problem that we have right now, is that kids are not empathetic to themselves. They're hard on themselves, right? They're, they've got to be perfect. We've got social media, and everything that's on social media, of course, has got to be true. And so they're comparing. I mean, I know when I grew up, you compared to the neighbor across the street. Mm-hmm. You didn't compare to millions of people on social media. So it is very hard for older children too. Yeah. But if you start them at a young age, you're building that foundation, and you're building them to be able to handle all these other things. I mean, anxiety right now is huge. It's high in the world because of the pandemic, but because we haven't been able to explain enough to these children. So empathy is important, to be able to show empathy towards someone else and towards yourself.
I agree. And you're right. It is so difficult these days. There is a lot of pressure on kids. Social media has just magnified that pressure. And we used to talk about when we were growing up, comparing yourselves to the Jones and the neighbor next door. Well, the Joneses might have looked like they were having a much better life, but there were still windows, and you could still see in the backyard, and you could see every once in a while that it's not as good as I think, But these days, kids are looking at influencers that are making these videos and wearing these clothes and driving these cars, and they have no idea that the reality is that that's not their car, it's not their clothes, they're borrowing it, and it's all an act, and it's not reality. And please don't compare yourself to those people, because you are amazing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Beyond, I just think that as we're talking here, one of the things that comes to mind, we talk about how can we talk to our middle school kids and kids even. I had this experience when it just as a experiment, I was in front of 500 kids, and they were third and fourth graders, and I said, how many of you kids, I know you can't bring it out now, I know none of you brought it to school, but how many of you kids have a cell phone? And 80% of the hands raised. And I said, and how many of you are on social media? And the teachers almost fell off their chair. This is maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when 60% of the kids raised their hand. So fourth grade isn't that far away from when they were with you. What were we talking, 5 years, 6 years? So
kindergarten, because they go off in kindergarten.
Yeah. So teaching kids to be empathetic, to love themselves, to start helping our kids get that foundation so they have some media literacy so they can protect themselves when they do go online at an earlier and earlier age, I think is really important.
Yeah, and, my series, as the first book was positivity, the second book was kindness, the third book was gratitude, and now this is empathy. And all of those character traits are learned character traits, right? They're not, fear and survival is what we have for our instincts. So all of those, when you start to put those into your life, when you start to be kind, like a lot of times I'll hear my kids go, that's not very kind, or please be kind. And obviously they're hearing it, right, from adults, right? They're with me a good chunk of their day. So when I say it to them, they're repeating it and they're understanding it. And I think that when you can get the foundation of kindness, right? Because kindness is, empathy runs into kindness, right? They all interact. And, if you can be positive, right? If you're not always thinking of the negative, your neurons in your brain are going to rewire, and you're going to be finding, the goodness in the world, the positive stuff in the world, the kindness in the world. The other day we were playing outside, and on my driveway was a heart. It was in the asphalt. It was the shape of a heart. And one of my kids said, look, this is the shape of a heart, because they look for the kindness in somebody. And so I think that's what we have to start doing. I think we have to start pointing out when they are being kind, pointing out when they are being empathetic to somebody else. And because I think a lot of, and again, this is no blame to schools or teachers, because we do the best that we can. But when you've got 20-something kids in a classroom and you've got to meet certain quotas, you're not always going to be the positive person. You can be running around with your head cut off. So I think it's important for children to learn at a young age that they need to start looking for the positive, start looking for the kindness, be that person. That's what you have to do. You have to embody it. Mm-hmm. And I know for myself, over the years, when I started to really look at this and I've been doing daycare and preschool for 32 years. And I can't say that I was the same person 32 years ago that I am now. I'm much better at loving the children and being with the children and teaching them the not just the ABCs or the numbers, but we have to teach them all of these character traits, because that is the social emotional learning that they need to learn, mm-hmm. because that's what's going to make them have the survival that they can.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about pointing out to kids when they're doing well, when they're doing the good thing. I remember a conversation I had back before I went into performing, and I was working a quote unquote real job and supervising some people, and somebody came up to me and said, "Why are you always telling your workers that they're doing a good job? They're doing their job. That's good enough. You don't need it." And I'm thinking, because I came, out of college, I was an athlete in college, and you make a good pass. It's like, great pass. You scored a goal. Great save. We're cheering all the great things that you're doing. Why should it be any different when our kids?
Right. Yeah. Well, and you know what? When you're in partnership with, and you can be in partnership with many people, and I'm in partnership with my preschoolers every single day. And part of that is acknowledgement and appreciation. That's one of the tools that if you acknowledge that, and you can see it in their body language, right? When you're talking to them and they, answer a question you ask them, and they, are beaming because they got it right. And you say, that was a great question. And I think that's the other thing. My books really emphasize on that. They emphasize on the goodness, like on Orbit says a lot of times, that's, and I guess I'm Orbit, right, in the book, but Orbit will compliment the kids, will say, that was a great answer, or wow, I didn't even think of that. And that's what teaches them that no matter what they say, it's okay, because you're going to get acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. And when you get acknowledgement, you can get appreciation. So I think that that's important, to give them that acknowledgement. It's important. And it's important to give that acknowledgement to adults mm-hmm. as well, to other people that you're working with, or, your family, or your partner, your, marriage partner, or whatever. It's important to show that you care, and that is one way of doing it, is acknowledging and appreciating them. Absolutely. And another thing that I've learned is that when you say, hey, thank you for emptying the dishwasher, I'll use that as an example. Thank you for emptying the dishwasher for me. For me, those two words changes that from thank you for emptying the dishwasher. Mm-hmm. And you said it. You said that they that why do you tell, why that's part of their job? It doesn't matter if it's part of their job. It's the fact that they did it, and they did it for you and me and everyone else. Mm-hmm. So adding those 2 words, for me, makes it more powerful.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of powerful, something really powerful happened to you recently, where your story was transformed, taken from the pages and made into a story walk. You tell us a little bit about that?
That was exciting. Yes. So about 16 months ago, I was speaking to one of my daycare grandparents, and she was putting a story walk in her school. She was a principal. And Diane said, oh, the story walk's great. And I'm like, well, what is a story walk? I've never heard of it. Come to find out, it's story frames that are placed along a trail. And Ann Ferguson from Montpelier, Vermont, she started this back in 2007. And it was just temporary story walks, and they eventually became permanent. And so I went to Rogers Free Library, and I applied for their grant, Friends of Rogers Free Library in my town, and they gave me the money to purchase the story frames and then a little bit more for other stuff that we needed for like cement and stuff like that. Then I had to find a place, and so I found Mount Hope Farm, which is a historic farm that Governor Bradford owned. And there was a beautiful cluster of trees on the land, and we converted that into the story walk. And so about 3 weeks ago, my second son and some of my daycare parents and a couple of kids from Roger Williams and one of my daycare children that started with me in kindergarten, at birth, and now he's in a senior in high school, came and volunteered. And we put these story walks in along the patch, and my book was featured for the first one, The Power of Kindness. And on October 15th, we had a ribbon cutting, and it was the first reading of the story walk, and I was very, very excited.
Yes.
We had this big, huge party, and it was awesome. So now every month it will change. Starting in December, it'll be a new story that the children can go to. There's activities that they can do at each station. And they just read the whole story. And then at the end, there's a couple of QR codes. One is, give me some feedback back. And then another one is like an activity. So for this month and to December, it was a kindness, kind of like bingo card where you check off or every time you do one of those kindness acts of kindness. So yeah, it was very exciting. And I'm thrilled that it's going to be in our town, and that the kids are going to be able to visit it, because it's a permanent one. So,
but that is very exciting. I know we have a story walk here in Reedville. It's that tells one very specific story, that Reedville here in Boston was the home of the Massachusetts 54th, the first all-black Army regiment that fought in the Civil War, and they trained here, and their parade grounds is now a playground, and it's 2 blocks away from my house.
Oh,
and
wow!
So there's a series of plaques around the parade ground that tell the story of these brave men and some women who supported them, and some of the struggles they went through, and some of the sacrifices they made. So I love that idea, and I mention our story walk here because I would love for this to be not such a special thing. I think there should be story walks all over the place. I think schools are a great place to have them. So hopefully this is sparking someone, inspiring somebody to get down to their local public servants and say, hey.
The funny thing is, I went to Tennessee last December, and we stumbled upon one down there that was a permanent one, and I can't remember the name of the town, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And there are story walks in 50 states and 15 countries as of right now.
Okay.
So, but they do a lot of temporary ones. It's very costly to do a permanent one. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I was very blessed to have partnered with, Friends of Rogers Free Library, because they were all on board about it. So it was really an awesome experience.
That's wonderful. Hey, I think we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about all 4 Power of books.
So we can go to Amazon, because it's on Amazon, or any local bookstore like Barnes and Nobles and stuff. But it's also on my website, which is ruthmaille-author.com.
Yeah, and we really love supporting independent bookshops. So if somebody goes, the book's probably not going to be on the shelf, but if they ask politely at the desk, will the bookstore owner be able to get a copy to their shelves pretty quickly?
Yes, actually they would. Yeah.
So why don't we do that too? That would be a very positive, kind, grateful, empathetic
and I'd
thing
be
to
very
do.
grateful for that.
Yes. We've had a great time speaking to the author of The Power of Empathy. Be the friend you've always wanted. She's also the author of The Power of series, Ruth Maille. Hey, Ruth, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you, Jed. I always enjoy my stay with you. This is awesome. Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And if you are an author, please be sure to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to learn how we can help you celebrate your book to the world. Being an author of a kid's book is really difficult, even when you have a giant publishing company behind you. If you're an independent author, self-published author, being an author, it's so much work because once your book is finished, then the real work begins. You suddenly have to become the marketing director, the salesperson. In other words, you are the CEO of your book business, and it's very difficult. You don't have to do it alone. We would love to help you celebrate your book to thousands and thousands of people throughout the United States, throughout the world. You can be a guest here in the podcast and in a long-form conversation, tell the world about your fantastic book and tell the world about your brand, like Ruth just did, telling us about her Power of series, her Power of brand. You can also submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read, just like all of Ruth's great books. And we can also celebrate your book through a package of commercials on the podcast, messages to our over 110,000 social media followers, and have your book displayed on a nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. You can learn all about that and more by going to readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on that author's button at the top of the page, and scrolling on down. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Ruth Maille. Please be sure to check out the Power of series, especially the brand new book, The Power of Empathy. Be the friend you always wanted. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Skylar Strauss, Jordan Staley. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.